Morning in Detroit was anything but quiet. On the barren construction lot, a massive cement truck roared, its steel drum grinding, spewing thick gray slurry like dead mud. The air stank of rusted iron, machine oil, and cement dust. But the noise wasn't the most terrifying thing. Across the mottled ground stood a vision torn from a nightmare. A gaunt female Doberman, ribs jutting sharp, tethered by a coarse rope to the mouth of the discharge chute. Her name was Raven. All four legs clawed at the dirt, carving faint streaks of blood, but her strength was no match. Beside her stumbled a tiny pup, Ash, barely 3 months old, trembling, not understanding. Only sensing that the monstrous machine was drowning his mother in something he could not fight. His thin yelps cracked in the air, shrill with panic. Carl Hensley, the foreman, stood over them, broad, unblinking, cold as steel. His grip tightened on the rope around Raven's neck. In his eyes, there was no hesitation, only contempt. To him, Raven and her pup were nothing but street trash, a burden to erase. The lever clanged. A gush of heavy cement poured from the chute, slamming onto Raven's back. It splattered across her ears, her muzzle, her wide, terrified eyes. A sound tore free, not a bark, not a growl, but a trembling cry, raw, breaking apart in her throat. Raven strained upward, but the wet stone clung like chains, weighing her down inch by inch. Her whole body was trapped in a coffin of gray. Ash darted forward. Tiny jaws sank into the rope, milk teeth tearing until blood welled from his gums. He pulled, scratched, desperate. The cement spattered his face, coating his little muzzle in pale crust. Still, he fought. Still, he cried. Carl gestured. The driver opened the flow wider. The chute thundered, unleashing a torrent. Raven shook, chest heaving, lungs rasping under the crush. Yet her eyes, drenched, unyielding, locked on her pup. They burned with one message: "Don't be afraid. I am here." Her legs thrashed, but the cement climbed higher. Stomach, hips, hind legs swallowed whole. Breath ragged, lungs wheezing, dust and tears blurred her sight. Even then, in her fading strength, Raven tilted her head, reaching her muzzle toward where Ash stood. Ash's voice broke raw. He leapt into the spray, licking the gray sludge from her face. His hot tears mingled with the icy weight smothering her. Too small, too weak, but his desperation cut like a knife. The scene was unbearable. A mother dog, entombed alive in liquid stone, writhing, staring at her pup as if for the last time. A fragile puppy, throat torn from screaming, claws bleeding as he begged the world to intervene. But the world was silent. Carl turned away, boots grinding on gravel. To him, the problem was finished. He didn't hear the cries. He didn't see the pleading eyes. He didn't see the single tear carving down Raven's hollowed face. Time slowed. Each drop of cement fell like a hammer, pressing life from her frame. Ash's heart pounded against his ribs, ready to burst. His screams cut through the gray air, but no one answered. Only Detroit's sky hung heavy, a mute witness to quiet cruelty. And in the instant that felt like the end, Raven still looked at her pup. That final gaze, bloodshot, blurred yet burning like fire, spoke what words never could. A mother's love does not surrender. Before the cement was poured, before the cry that split the air across that desolate lot, Raven had known another world. Not one of ropes, cold mud, and contemptuous stares, but a smaller world, a warmer one, a place she once belonged. She no longer remembered the face of the person who cradled her as a pup, yet the scent of warm skin lingered. The echo of a child's laughter still flickered somewhere deep inside her. It was the faint smell of soap drifting through a kitchen, the slap of slippers across worn wood floors, the heat of an old sofa where she had drifted into sleep each afternoon. Those fragments of memory trembled like candles in a draught, weak but never fully extinguished. Then came the day the door shut behind her. Her people moved away. They did not take her. Detroit's streets became her new home, cold, merciless, without a single hand to comfort. Once a house dog, fed without question, she now pawed through trash bins, searching for moldy bread crusts or brittle bones just to survive another night. When her body began to change, she understood. She was carrying life. Through endless days on mud-stained sidewalks, hunger gnawed at her frame, yet inside her grew something more fragile, more sacred than her own hunger. Ash was born beneath a sheet of rusted tin near an abandoned site. Rain battered the night, wind lashed against the metal walls, but Raven shielded him with her own body. She licked him clean, fragile and blood-red, listening to the faintest whisper of breath. Her eyes blazed then, with the certainty only a mother knows. The world could turn its back, but she still had a reason to live. Day by day, Raven led Ash down broken streets. Her ribs jutted sharply, but whenever she found scraps, a stale crust, a discarded pizza corner, she nudged it toward him. She waited, stomach cramping, but her eyes softened with quiet joy watching him eat. Ash grew. His legs wobbled, then steadied into clumsy runs. He barked at leaves spinning in the wind, chased a plastic bag as though it were prey. Each time, Raven sat close, gaze tender. Exhaustion pulled at her body, but every uncertain step of her pup breathed strength back into her. On freezing nights, rain fell heavily on Detroit. Raven curled herself tight, wrapping Ash in her body. She stayed awake, eyes wide, guarding against the world. A drunk's stagger, the roar of an engine, the wrong sound in the dark. If he were safe, she would bear the cold, the hunger, all of it. People in the neighborhood noticed. Children sometimes reached for Ash. Parents yanked them away. "Don't!" Filthy others threw stones, splashed water, shouted. Raven never fought back. She folded her ears, shielded her pup with her frame, and walked away in silence. Her eyes dropped low, but inside they glowed with the quiet fire of a mother who bore shame so her child would not. And within that harshness, something bloomed, a love without language, without promises. Only the warmth of Ash pressed to her chest, the drum of her own heart a lullaby. It was enough to keep them standing. Yet the site where she found shelter, where she braved the storms, was turning dangerous. Each morning the mixers roar. The shouts of men are already impatient, the stone-cold eyes of Carl Hensley. Raven felt it. A storm was coming, and when it came without mercy. Detroit, in its years of reconstruction, was no longer the city of Motown melodies or gleaming cars. On the eastern edge, construction sites sprouted like weeds. Steel, cement, machines. Together they formed a massive orchestra, playing a heavy, merciless score. And within that score were men who saw every fragile life as nothing more than static. One of them was Carl Hensley. Carl was 50, built broad, with shoulders thick, his face the color of dried cement. His eyes carried no light but contempt. Decades as a foreman had trained him to bark orders, to wield authority, to decide what deserved to remain and what should be discarded. To him, strays were living waste, eyesores, nuisances. Each morning when Raven and Ash crept close to the site seeking shelter from the rain, Carl noticed. He didn't need a reason. The sight of Raven's emaciated frame, her pup trailing at her side, was offense enough. Once he picked up a stone and hurled it. It grazed Raven's back, leaving a raw streak. Ash flinched, ducking beneath her belly. Raven didn't bark, didn't fight back. She simply stood firm, shielding her pup, her eyes fixed on him. That gaze unsettled Carl more than anything. In those weary eyes still flickered something he could not snuff out. A quiet flame. Not the threat of teeth, but the resilience of a mother. It was that resilience he despised most. Another time, Raven and Ash huddled beneath a rusted sheet of tin, trying to escape the downpour. Carl came upon them, shouting, tossing a bucket of filthy water. It splashed over Raven, soaking her to the bone. Ash shivered, pressing into her chest. Raven stood still, lifted a paw to cover him more fully, then lowered her head in silence. Carl laughed, low and cruel. In his mind, silence meant weakness, and weakness was made to be crushed. The days that followed sharpened Raven's instincts. Each time Carl's boots crunched gravel, her body stiffened. Ears pricked, eyes darting for escape. But with Ash still so small, flight was never fast enough. She had no choice: endure or stand guard. Carl began treating the chasing off of dogs as part of his daily routine, as though driving them out was another way of keeping the site orderly. But inside, something darker was forming, a plan to finish it once and for all. Winter in Detroit was brutal. Raven grew thinner still. Ash, though clumsy, had learned to follow, eyes bright, legs unsteady. The sight of the two near the site made some younger workers shake their heads. One muttered, "Poor things, but best not to get involved. Carl doesn't want them around." Carl's feelings went beyond dislike. To him, Raven and Ash's existence was provocation. Each time he saw Ash's clear eyes lifted toward his mother, frustration coiled in him. That bond, pure, undeniable, was everything he had never known. Its very presence mocked the emptiness inside him, and for that, he hated them. Raven felt the threat tightening. At night, she curled around her pup, eyes fixed on the flicker of street lamps. Every sound, every step in the dark sent her body quivering. Ash, still innocent, slept in peace, his breath steady. Raven did not. The weight in her chest grew heavier with each hour. One misty morning, she led Ash toward the site in search of scraps. The cement mixer's rumble growled like some waiting beast. Carl stood at a distance, arms folded, watching. His eyes narrowed. And in that look, the cruel decision was already set. Raven couldn't tell when the storm would break, but instinct, sharper than reason, whispered one truth. Danger was closing in. And this time, it would not end with stones or shouts. The Detroit sun had not yet broken the horizon, and already the air on the site was thick with oil and dust. The cement truck roared, its steel drum grinding heavy circles. Beside it, Carl Hensley tightened the rope in his rough hand, dragging Raven toward the mouth of the chute. Raven fought with everything left inside her. Her front claws scraped against gravel, leaving bloody streaks. Breath rasped in her throat, but the rope cut deeper, jerking her wasted frame sideways. At her flank, Ash followed, barking until his voice cracked. The puppy's thin cries rang out across the emptiness, shrill, desperate, echoing against steel and stone. Carl lifted his hand. The driver pulled the lever. A metallic clang, then a gush of thick cement spilled out, crashing down on Raven's back. The first touch was ice, heavy as stone. Raven cried out, her body convulsing. The gray sludge clung to her fur, sliding over her chest, binding her legs. Each second, the weight thickened, pressing in like giant arms, locking her in an unrelenting embrace. Ash lunged forward, tiny jaws snapping at the rope. His baby teeth tore until blood welled from his gums. He scraped the ground raw, then licked at his mother's face, already buried in gray. The cement smeared across his nose, his mouth, but he never stopped. His bark broke into a scream, small yet sharp enough to cut the air like a blade. Carl stepped back, arms folded. To him, this was nothing but dirty work to be finished. Without hesitation, he nodded. The valve opened wider. Another wave of cement thundered down. Raven lifted her head, eyes wide, tears streaming. Her forelegs thrashed, but it was like sinking in a swamp of stone. Her chest convulsed, breath ragged and choking. Yet even as her body sank deeper, her gaze never left Ash. Her eyes blazed with one message: "I am still here. Don't give up." The cement swallowed her stomach, rolled over her hips, and locked her hind legs. Raven gagged, head thrown back. Ash screamed, his tiny voice ricocheting off the empty site, rattling the cold air. He pressed himself against her chest, licking the cold crust, clawing with all his might. Morning light cut through, striking the rising gray mound that swallowed her body. That single shaft of sunlight seemed to etch the moment into human memory, a sight no one should endure, and none should ever cause. Raven fought once more. Her forelegs jerked, flinging wet clumps of cement into the air. She growled, low and hoarse, half despair, half defiance. In that sound burned the fire of a mother's vow, a declaration carved into the air. No force will take my child from me. Ash kept crying, licking and clawing until blood stained his paws. His barks, frail yet relentless, rang out across the hollow site, crashing against concrete walls. They were more than a puppy's cries. They were the voice of life itself, the voice of a bond that could not be buried. Carl turned his back, cigarette between his lips, convinced the matter was done. But he did not know. At that very moment, when a mother Doberman fought an avalanche of cement for her child, and when a pup screamed the world awake, something had begun. A wave that would not stop, a wave that would rattle the city to its core. The cement mixer still roared like a steel beast. Raven thrashed weakly inside the thick gray slurry, her breath broken, her eyes drowning in tears. Ash wailed, his tiny body coated in cement, clinging to his mother's chest as though his cries alone could hold her to life. The site seemed empty, no ears to hear. But at the far end of the broken street, an old man walked slowly. Harold Jenkins, 67, carried a paper sack of bread after finishing a late shift at the repair shop. He usually kept his head down, but that morning his steps faltered at a sound. At first, he thought he had imagined it. A noise, thin and piercing, like a child's cry, but sharper, more desperate. He stopped, lifted his head. The sound echoed from the abandoned site. Harold stepped closer, and when he rounded the crumbling brick corner, the sight froze his heart. Raven, the mother dog, was sinking into the cement. Her body convulsed, legs already vanishing beneath the gray. On her chest, a fragile pup screamed, clawing, frantic. "Oh, Lord," Harold whispered, his hand trembling. The sack of bread slipped, rolling into the dust, forgotten. His old heart pounded, eyes blurred. He had never seen cruelty so raw. He didn't think. He ran, kneeling in the muck. His rough hands tore at the cement around Raven's neck. The wet stone seared with cold, tearing at his nails, splitting his skin. He didn't stop. His voice shook, a broken prayer. "Hold on, girl. Hold on for your baby." Ash knew. He darted, biting Harold's pant leg, then back to his mother, shrieking as though guiding the man. Harold gritted his teeth, tears spilling. He knew he couldn't do it alone. His shout split the air. "Somebody! Help me! She's going to die here!" Across the yard, 2 young workers, Eli and Marcus, were leaving early. They heard, paused. They dropped their tools and ran toward the cry. When they saw Raven trapped in cement, both stopped cold. "God almighty," Eli gasped. "We have to act now." Marcus didn't waste words. He seized a shovel, slamming it into the fresh concrete. Harold clawed barehanded, blood streaking the gray. Eli dashed to the truck, fumbling at the controls. At last, the valve screeched shut. The roar died. The flood stopped. "Got it!" Eli shouted, chest heaving. "Now pull her out!" Harold and Marcus worked in rhythm, cement caking their arms, their fingers raw and bleeding. Raven groaned in pain, but didn't fight them. In her wet, shining eyes, something shifted. Trust. She knew these hands were not here to kill. They were here to save. Ash wove between them, barking, licking his mother's face, begging them all not to stop. His cries became fuel, pushing the men past their breaking point. The seconds stretched into eternity. Cement gripped like chains. Marcus cursed, straining. "Too heavy! It's setting already." Harold's voice cracked, his old hands trembling but relentless. Blood smeared red against the gray. "No, don't stop. She's alive. For her pup. She won't give in." A narrow gap broke open around Raven's chest. Harold jammed his hand in, pulling hard. Raven whimpered, her body shuddering. Eli dropped beside them, gripping the edge. Together, the 3 tore chunks loose, piece by piece. With one last, desperate heave, Raven came free, half her frame still caked in stone but alive. She collapsed, gasping, her body soaked, her fur hardened with gray. Ash scrambled onto her chest, licking wildly. Raven turned, eyes clouded, and saw him. A single hot tear slid down her face. No one spoke. The 3 men only panted, hands bleeding, clothes drenched with cement. But in their eyes burned one truth. They had dragged life back from death. Harold's voice shook as he laid a hand on Raven's head. "You're safe now, girl. Safe. You won't die here. Not in front of us." Above them, Detroit's sky split with a pale beam of light, cutting through the haze. It fell across the scene, a trembling mother, her pup clinging, 3 men streaked with cement and blood yet lit by something fierce. For a moment, the cruelty of the sight was torn wide open, and there, in the cold heart of concrete, hope flared. The road to Detroit's community clinic wasn't long, but that morning every step felt endless. Harold Jenkins led the way, eyes set, gripping the edge of the makeshift stretcher. Beside him, Eli and Marcus stooped under the weight, their arms trembling as they carried Raven. Half her body was caked in cement, half bleeding raw, her eyes shut as though fading into darkness. On her chest, Ash refused to let go. The tiny pup pressed close, whimpering, his wide eyes frantic. He trembled with every step, yet kept licking his mother's face, as if his warmth alone could anchor her to life. The clinic came into view, a worn-out building, rust streaking its metal door, a crooked sign barely legible, Detroit Community Animal Clinic. The door burst open when Harold shouted, "Help! Somebody, please! She's dying!" A figure in white sprinted out. Dr. Celeste Monroe, a veterinarian in her 40s, hair tied hastily, eyes heavy with concern. One glance was enough. She knew the fight would be brutal. "Quick, bring her to the table." The room glowed under weak fluorescent light. Raven was laid on the cold steel table. The air thickened with the stench of wet cement, blood, singed fur, and rust. Celeste's hands ran down her back. The cement had hardened into stone, clinging to blistered flesh. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Dear God, how is she still alive?" Eli held the flashlight. Marcus grabbed gauze. Harold stood close, clutching Ash, trying to still his trembling. But Ash writhed, desperate to climb up, to keep his mother in sight. Raven's breaths faltered. For a moment, they stopped altogether. Celeste bent low, ear against her chest, then tapped. No response. She reached for the syringe of adrenaline, when suddenly a sharp cry shattered the silence. Ash! His scream ripped through the room, thin but piercing, slicing into the still air. And as though pulled back from the brink, Raven convulsed once. Her tail twitched. A sudden ragged breath tore free. Harold gasped, tears clouding his eyes. "She's back! She's still here!" Celeste's voice steadied, fierce. "Hold her steady!" "We have a chance." An IV slid into place. Fluids dripped. Painkillers eased their way into her veins. Celeste worked the hardened cement loose, chipping, cutting, dropping gray shards onto the floor. Each break exposed raw burns, split skin. Raven whimpered but did not resist. Her cloudy eyes stayed locked on Ash. Time stretched thin. Outside, rain misted down. Inside, 3 men and 1 doctor fought against death itself. Ash lay cradled in Harold's hands, never once looking away. Every so often, he cried out, as if setting the rhythm for his mother's heart. Marcus pulled out his phone, recording. Raven is still unconscious, Ash screaming. Harold is whispering prayers. Celeste bent over, hands working frantically. He typed a caption. "They tried to kill her with cement. She's still fighting. We need help now." The clip lasted 15 seconds. When it hit the internet, it struck like a match to dry tinder. Within an hour, it spread hundreds of times. By nightfall, thousands. Detroit roared with outrage. Who did this? They must be held accountable. Messages flooded in, offers of medicine, food, money. Strangers who had never met now stood in the same line, drawn together by a Doberman mother and her pup. Phones at the clinic rang without pause. Celeste had never seen anything like it. Every call a pledge. We'll bring supplies. We'll donate. We'll stand with her. Inside, Raven lay motionless. Yet the drip of fluids began to restore her. The green line on the monitor steadied, pulsing faintly but sure. Ash, exhausted, curled against her side, eyes fixed on each breath. Harold bent low, whispering, "Listen, girl. The whole city's behind you. Don't leave him. Don't leave us. 1 beat, 2. Then Raven's eyes opened, slow, clouded, but alive. A spark glinted in her pupils. Her tail shifted. Ash sprang up, barking with all his strength. Harold broke into a tearful smile. "She hears us." Outside, the clip continued to spread. From one silent worksite, the story had reached thousands of hearts. Anger transformed into force, and as Raven's eyes met her pup's, Detroit knew this wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning, a call to stand against cruelty itself. Detroit trembled after the clip. The name Carl Hensley spread across every mouth, every evening broadcast. People pointed at the image of him dragging Raven into the cement, spitting words, "That man will pay." Public pressure spread like fire. Detroit police had no choice but to act. On a rainy afternoon, Carl was handcuffed outside his crumbling home. Cameras captured his bowed head, his face shadowed. On the split screen, footage showed Raven in the clinic, bandaged, her eyes closed but her breathing steady. The city exhaled. At the clinic, Dr. Celeste Monroe watched in awe as Raven inched forward on unsteady steps. Her shaved patches showed new fur sprouting, her skin beginning to knit. But it was her eyes that silenced everyone. No longer clouded, they glimmered, weary yet alive. And when Ash bounded around, leaping onto the chair, Raven lifted her head. Her tail gave the faintest wag. The room erupted. Harold Jenkins came every day. He brought soft bread, peeled apples, and a smile Detroit hadn't seen on his old face in years. Eli and Marcus dropped by too, sharing stories, cleaning up, slipping a blanket under the table so Ash could curl beside his mother. The tiny clinic became a light in a gray neighborhood. Then one morning, Harold stood watching as Raven hobbled into the backyard. Ash tumbled after her, chasing his own shadow. Harold turned to Celeste, eyes shining. "They can't go back to the streets." "Let me take them home, both of them. I've got a little yard. They'll have a porch roof, not rusted tin." Celeste smiled and nodded. Eli and Marcus clapped Harold's shoulders. News spread quickly. The old man who had knelt in the cement would take Raven and Ash home. The city embraced it as the final, beautiful chapter of a nightmare. On the day of release, Raven stepped out the door, bandages still wrapped around her chest. Each step trembled, but her eyes fixed on Harold. Ash bounced in circles, tail wagging furiously. Neighbors gathered, clapping, some wiping tears. "Come on, girl. Let's go home," Harold whispered. And so, the two lives once nearly buried in cement were carried into something new. A home. But the story didn't end there. Raven's case wasn't just about Carl Hensley's sentence. It sparked a wave across Detroit. Stories of cruelty poured online. Pictures of abandoned dogs and cats flooded feeds, each stamped with the same question: how long will we stay silent? The city council was forced to reopen animal protection laws. Newspapers named Raven and Ash symbols. Detroit, once spoken of only with statistics of job loss and shuttered plants, now carried another image: two dogs who woke a city's conscience. That night in Harold's old wooden house on the edge of town, Raven curled on a rug before the fire. Ash pressed tight against her chest. Harold rocked in his chair, silent, watching flames dance. Stroking his silver beard, he murmured, "Sleep now. You're safe." Outside, the Detroit wind cut through empty rows of houses. The city still bore shadows, still full of men like Carl. But inside that small house, rare peace had arrived. Ash twitched in his sleep, gave a tiny bark. Raven opened her eyes, licked his head, reminding him she was still there. And then Harold looked through the window. A figure stood by the fence in the distance, watching, before vanishing into the dark, his brow furrowed. Detroit was like that. Never quiet for long. The story seemed to close with a homecoming, but in truth, it was only the beginning. Because Raven and Ash hadn't just survived, they had become symbols. And symbols don't remain behind four walls. They step forward, writing new chapters no one can yet see. Have you ever witnessed a living soul fight to its last breath? Raven, the Doberman mother, refused to surrender even as the cement tried to bury her alive. And Ash, the fragile pup, screamed until the world came running. Today, they have a home. But the story doesn't stop there. Detroit still holds its shadows. Others like Carl remain. Raven, Ash, and Harold have only begun a new journey, not just to survive, but to stand as a testament to justice and compassion. So I ask you, have you ever saved a life? A dog, a cat, or any trembling creature staring down death? Share your story in the comments. Let us know compassion still exists. Let Raven and Ash know they are not alone. Thank you for staying with us to the end. If your heart broke with ours, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what comes next. Because this is only the beginning. See you in the next chapter of Raven and Ash.